time. I'm sure we will have additional people joining us, but we want to make sure we are conscious of everybody's time. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to turn off mics and cameras. So if you have questions, please put that in the chat. And I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Alfano, and she will start us off. But with that, let's get rolling.
Hi, I'm happy to introduce our speaker. That's Abigail. Of course, I can't talk now. Abigail Dutcher. She's at the University of St. Francis in beautiful Fort Wayne, Indiana. She serves as the director of the Master of Arts in Teaching and Transition to Teaching secondary program. Abigail attended 2 of our Create workshops last summer, and she's going to tell us how she adapted what she learned to lessons. Abigail specializes in science and universal design for learning, where she integrates into her teaching accessible, inclusive, and engaging learning environments. She teaches courses in education, including a UDL-focused course, modeling best practices like differentiated instruction and choice-driven student outputs. Abigail is also experienced as an instructional coach and a researcher, and her doctoral work focused on artificial intelligence role in enhancing lesson planning. Her dedication to empowering future educators and fostering equitable education defines her approach to teaching and learning. So we're very lucky to have her speaking today. Before Abigail speaks, I'd like to mention that we're the Create Energy Center, that's createenergy.org. And you might want to go up to our website and see these workshops like Abigail attended last summer. We have 4 workshops. One of them is a virtual solar institute this summer, really early, late spring, early summer. And then we have the STEM Educator Solar Institute in Wisconsin in July, the North Carolina STEM Educator Energy Institute in July, and a Wisconsin Solar Plus Storage Institute in July. So a lot of opportunities, and you don't have to be from Wisconsin or North Carolina to attend any of these. So please go up and look at what the opportunity presents for you. I'd like to mention also our innovation series. This webinar is part of the innovation series. I'm not going to read through all of these great webinars that are coming up, but you might want to look at them. We hope that you will attend, but if you can't attend in the time that is offered, you can always look at the recording. So with that, I'd like to go over to Abigail and have her speak. Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen if you'll give me just one moment. So just real quick, I'm going to go over our agenda. So I'm going to really be spending time talking about how to integrate the Create resources into reading, writing, and math instruction. So we're going to go in that order. And just to put in a plug for the Create workshops in Kidwind, I had the opportunity to attend 2 workshops this summer, and it was completely out of my comfort zone. It was a lot of new learning for me. And it just absolutely changed how I've come around STEM education and science education in general. So if anybody's on the call or sees this, I highly recommend that you attend those workshops. I also am part of a Kidwind battery curriculum, and so I'm helping them just write some of their curriculum. So what really got me started thinking about the Create lesson plans and this work is I work with a lot of teachers, and I teach pre-service teachers. And the biggest thing that we always have on the back of our minds is time. I know that in Indiana, we currently have statewide literacy goals with science of reading. So there's a huge push for science of reading and writing instruction. And we also have a huge push for mathematics instruction. And unfortunately, sometimes with those pushes, the other content areas like science and social studies sometimes gets pushed to the side. So my goal was to put it back in the forefront and say it doesn't have to get pushed to the side. We can really integrate this into these other areas. So two things about this is I want us to, when I show some of these resources, I want us to remember that we don't need to plow a field with a spoon. So some of the ways that I'm going to talk about differentiation and adjusting lesson plans, I am going to be talking about how to use AI to do that. So we're going to really think of how to do some of these things quickly and efficiently with AI. So in this presentation, I'm going to use AI as a content creator in some of the aspects. So I'm going to go ahead and just start off with reading and how some ways that we can incorporate these lessons and incorporate them into reading instruction. So based on what we know about the science of reading is in order to create skilled reading, we know that we need to have language comprehension that involves providing students with background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge, along with in the primary grades, the phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. We're not going to really talk about that in this presentation. We're going to stay more under the language comprehension. So one thing that I love about these lesson plans is they all have a lot of text in them. They have introductions in them. And so one way that I've really used these lesson plans, and I've worked with pre-service teachers and teachers in the field to use the lessons, is to do text leveling. Text leveling allows the lessons to be accessed by all students, no matter their reading level. And it also allows for example, if you're an elementary teacher or a middle school teacher, it allows you to make these exact same lessons and activities accessible to younger students. So what I did is I used the prompt on the previous slide. So here, this is one of the create lesson plans. Here's the introduction. The introduction actually had more paragraphs than this. And I took the words from the introduction and I asked AI, I just prompted in ChatGPT, I just asked, what Lexile level is this? And it told me that the Lexile level for this particular lesson was at 1040 to 1070, which falls for high school to early college level readers. And we know that sometimes some of our students in high school might not be quite at that reading level. So this was just a way for me to just figure out like what reading level was this lesson plan currently available to students at. But then I asked AI to just rewrite that same text at a Lexile 750, which is a 5th, 6th grade reading level, while maintaining the same information. So here we see it's the same text, it goes over the same content, but it's at a different reading level. So these lesson plans, I love that they have so many different blurbs and the deep vocabulary, but I also love that you can use AI to help adjust some of those reading levels in it. So if you're an elementary middle school teacher, it allows you to use these in your classrooms. Something, if you are a high school teacher and if you are integrating these lessons, maybe you are a reading teacher or maybe you are a science teacher and you just want to incorporate reading, is these allow for great fluency practice. So something that I've used these lesson plans with students on is, let's say I have a student who can't initially read some of the introductions. I start them, I use AI to rewrite the lesson at a Lexile 750 and we practice on that lesson. And then I use AI to rewrite it at 850, and then we practice on that. And then 950, and then 1050. So slowly raising the reading level. And it's really cool then to see the students who maybe started reading some of the introductions at a 750 reading level, they get to eventually get up to that point where they're reading it at a higher reading level. So that's where we're really working on making the fluency, is making the learning increasingly more automatic, and it's moving our students into more skilled reading. Something else that you can use AI with these specific lesson plans. I love these lesson plans and I love how rich they are in vocabulary. And vocabulary, as you see on Scarborough's rope, is one of the main things that we need to provide to students so that way they are growing in their reading level. So something that you can do with these lesson plans is you can copy and paste the text from the lesson plans. And here you see in the top right-hand corner, I asked AI to just test me on these terms at different DOK levels. So now I'm using AI. Before we were using it as a content creator where we were rewriting some of the text levels for students, but now the students can use AI and they can use it to study the different terms. So they can actually study the vocabulary terms, and you can also have them study it at higher DOK levels. So having them start studying the vocabulary terms at DOK 1, DOK 2, and then DOK 3. And AI here in this example, you can see it asks the students which vocabulary term describes a system compromising solar panels and associated components that convert sunlight into energy. So students are working on that vocabulary. So something else that you can use AI for in these lessons that's very quick is just asking them what vocabulary is in this passage. And here you can see it just quickly pulled out the vocabulary, and that can be the vocabulary list that you're working with students on. And here I'm using AI as the tutor, test me on these words one at a time. So the AI is slowly testing kids on each of those words. And then here, it's the definition, and the students would then provide the word. So as much as we can connect content that is aligned with background knowledge, vocabulary, or that fluency, it's really integrating reading into the create lesson plans and the science of reading. So I really encourage any teachers who are science teachers to incorporate some of these reading instructional methods into your course. But also, if you're a reading teacher, these lesson plans could be the basis of your reading lesson. And then at the very end of your lesson, you could then get out some of the hands-on activities or integrate it into math. But the actual reading passages in these lesson plans are really great and can help with the fluency. And they can really help students move up into higher lexile levels just because they're exposed to that rich vocabulary. Before I move on to writing, I just wanted to take a moment and see if there was any questions about reading instruction before we move on.
I have a question for you, Abigail.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit familiar with the Lexile reading levels, but I don't know what DOK is. Can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, DOK means depth of knowledge. So if depth of knowledge level 1 would be your recall. So if I'm working, if I ask AI, I'm working on these vocabulary words at a DOK level 1, what the questions it'll be providing for me are like, it might give me the definition and I just give it the answer. I'm just doing basic recall. Where a DOK level 2, it'll require more, a little bit more abstract thinking. In DOK 3, the AI might provide an example, like a real world example, and then you say what vocabulary. So it's kind of moving students a little bit further up into higher order levels of thinking.
Thank you.
All right, so if there are no other questions on reading, I'm going to move into writing. And something else I love about these lesson plans is they really provide an opportunity to engage students in the writing process. A lot of times when I'm working with K-12 schools, I see a lot of integration into narrative writing and more of like literature writing, but these lesson plans can offer a segue into text structure and that nonfiction descriptive writing. So this is the writing rope. And so this writing rope, these content areas, anytime that you can integrate generating ideas, gathering information, the writing process in general, grammar, punctuation, informational opinion structures, that's a big one that these lesson plans can offer. Paragraph structure, sequencing, transition words. Anytime that you can incorporate these, you really are integrating writing into your lesson plans. So one way that I love using the lesson plans to integrate writing thought processes is through the generation of ideas. So just working through students on that brainstorming part. So anytime that you're working with these lesson plans and you can employ diverse brainstorming techniques, that's an integration into writing. And that could be free writing where they're just writing about what they're experiencing in the lesson plan. It could be some kind of mind mapping, brain writing. Scamper is one that I love using in the lesson plans where you're having students come up with ideas and they have their ideas. And then you guide them with prompts like, if you were to substitute something in your writing, what would you substitute? If you had to combine something, if you had this idea in your writing and you had to adapt it to this situation, if you had to modify it. Even if students aren't writing a full paper, just having these discussions and employing some of these brainstorming techniques is actually an integration into writing curriculum and standards. So here's a little bit more into Scamper, and I can share the slides at the end. And it's just a really creative thinking and problem solving technique that really prompts students to generate new ideas and formulate new ideas and opinions. And also gathering information. So these lesson plans have so much information, and research can really be a big part of the lesson plans. So one thing that I really love doing with these lesson plans is having students use Notebook LM from Google. So Notebook LM, if you just go to notebooklm.google.com, you can have this, you can access the free AI tool. And if you just go to create new notebook, from there, you can upload sources, websites, YouTube videos, and you can compile a whole bunch of sources. So if you are working with students on a lesson plan and there's some of that rich vocabulary and that rich concepts, you can have students go out and research those and compile their sources and data on this. And the cool thing about this compilation with Notebook LM is after all of the data is compiled, it has all the sources right there for the students, but it also allows the students then to interact with the AI. So if they're compiling YouTube videos and research articles about the create energy topics and resources, as they're going through their lesson plans or as they're engaging in the experience or the experiments in the lesson plans, they can have their Notebook LM open and they can be writing that AI tool questions, and they can be taking research notes, and they can be making manuscripts of their work as well. So all the content for their create lesson plans are in that spot. And I've also noticed too, even though the gathering of information is technically a writing curriculum standard, it really has also, I've noticed, linked with reading, where students, when they're integrating these tools from the create lesson plans and they're compiling other resources and finding it, they're developing that vocabulary and that reading strategies as well. And the create lesson plans too, I love just giving students the opportunity just to write about their experiments, write about the process of what they learned, and giving them that informational writing time, just because that's a huge part of what's missing in our writing processes currently. So just even giving them that time to write about what they're learning in that nonfiction standpoint, and maybe using that Notebook LM or using that vocabulary from the reading part and integrating that into their writing as they're going through it. And if anybody on here hasn't used Notebook LM, I highly recommend it. It has been a lifesaver in my dissertation as I'm gathering sources and different things like that. Okay, before I move on to math, I would love to take any questions, thoughts about writing.
It's a question from Jason Oliver. He says, what level of confirmation spot checking do you suggest before deploying AI generated content to students?
A lot. So definitely don't just take AI generated content and give it to students. I go through and I read it thoroughly. Another piece of advice I would give you is use a couple AI generators. So I like to start with ChatGPT. throw it in, and then from there, maybe use Gemini and get that other thought, have a couple AI generators. But definitely, if you're using it for AI created content, I would definitely check the content and make sure it aligns how you want. I have not had issues though with the tutoring system. So if we go back, I'm going to go back in my slides real quick. Here, when we're using AI as a tutor, I have not had issues with it, because when you're using AI to recreate content, you have to understand that it's pulling from the internet, and it's not being told where to gather that information other than just rewriting it. But if you're using AI as a tutor, here you already have a set of defined vocabulary words, and so it's pretty black and white. So if you're doing something like that, where it's like the answers are pretty black and white, there's no discrepancy, I feel like it's pretty safe. But if it's something that's more open-ended and there's a big pool, I would then recommend really spot checking. Something else to help with that is, if you are using AI, if you upload a document into the AI department or the AI chat feature, and if you say save to memory, and then you keep working on the chat, you're training AI to go back and only pull from that document. So if you are doing this save from memory feature, I feel like at that point it is pretty safe, because you're telling it and you're training it where you want it to pull from. But as far as just pulling from websites in general, or like just if you're just blank, just saying AI to do something, yes, please spot check it.
We have a comment from Ken Walls. Do you want to say this, Ken, or should I read it off?
Oh, sure. This is actually going back a little bit to the previous part of the presentation, but I can just remember being on textbook selection committees, 10, 15 years ago, where if we were evaluating a couple books, we'd have to submit them to a reading specialist to have their difficulty assessed. And it was a really time-consuming process, and we were only limited to like 2 or 3 texts for that reason, because, obviously there's lots of other courses that needed that service too. And I just think it's pretty amazing that you can now do this with AI, and, basically an instructor can do it themselves and do it in short order. It's really neat use of that tool that I never realized existed. So I'm really glad you're sharing it with us. Thank you, Abigail.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really love that specific feature, especially when you're working with high school students who might struggle with reading. And so you can then level the text and they can access the content, or if you're working with students with disabilities. So I definitely love using it in that way. Okay, so our very last topic that I want to talk about, and I apologize for rushing through. I just wanted to get a whole bunch of info in a short amount of time. As I was looking through a lot of the work this summer at the Institute, I just love the lesson plans. I know it's important for students, but again, that pressure of making sure that we're teaching math and having that math and reading, writing kind of on the forefront. And so as I was working with teachers, we wanted to develop a way that math teachers could access the lesson plans, and they could know specifically what the lesson plans offered. Or if they're science teachers, they could be strategic in how they employ the lessons, so that way they're putting focus on some of the math content. So math process standards are the standards I chose for alignment, just because the process standards, obviously there's kindergarten math standards, 3rd grade math standards, 12th grade, but the math process standards are K-12. So they're developed by National Council for Teaching Mathematics, and it's the core math skills that we really want students to leave high school with. So here I have the 8 process standards. And so working with specifically math teachers, they found it helpful to be able to work on integration of lesson plans if they knew specifically what math process standard aligned with the lesson plan. So here, for example, on the left-hand column are the lesson plans that are created by Create that I just absolutely love. They're very solid lesson plans. And then at the top, I put each of the math process standards that are applicable grades K through 12. And you can see that the checks represent if that process standard is integrated into that lesson plan already. So here you'll see that most of the standards, if you're a math teacher, most of them already have the make sense of problems and persevering and solving them. And then as we go through, there's some that are a little bit less, but still, if you're a math teacher and you're working on specific modeling with mathematics, here are some great lessons that have the real world applications in them. If you're working on students on creating viable arguments and critiquing their reasoning, you can see which ones there are. This one's a big one. I used to be a middle school math teacher, and students had a really hard time using tools. So if you're working with students on using math tools or science tools and just learning how to read them, the standards that are checked there are really helpful in getting kids the tools in their hands and learning how to use those tools. And I know that tools develop over time and tools change, but I think just getting students engaged in that process of using the tools is very important. So as I've been working with math teachers, they found this helpful when they were kind of picking what they wanted to integrate into their lessons, just so that way they knew, okay, how does this specific lesson integrate into this math skill that I'm trying to teach in my classroom? So I hope that if there's any math teachers out there who are watching this, or if there's a science teacher and you just want to integrate math, I hope that this tool could be a strategic way that you can do that. And I will make sure that I share this in chat as well. For anybody who is integrating math.
You have a question from Colleen Fisk. Oops, it disappeared. There we go, back again. There we go. For using tools, do you mean physical tools like rulers, thermometers, or multimeters? And are these national math standards that you're referring to?
Yeah, so they're NCTM. So when you look at the math standards, every single grade level will have math process standards along with their content standards. So these are the math process standards that are national math standards. Yes. And as far as tools, yes, I mean all of those. Maybe not thermometers, but just hands-on different reading tools, interacting with tools.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Anybody want to speak up or can?
I was just gonna ask Abigail, have you talked to some math teachers that have used your cross-reference documents yet? Because that seems like just a tremendous resource to have.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually how I got them to use some of the lesson plans. Just because it's overwhelming when you log in and you see the lesson plans and maybe you don't have a science background, but if they can say, I'm working on this math process standard, oh, I can use this, and then they can act for them when they don't have that science or they're not coming from science standards, it allows them to access it. Yes.
I have another question. Is there lab hands-on activity to go along with the lessons?
That
It
would be a
depends.
Scott question, actually.
Yeah, that is a Scott question.
You there, Scott? Maybe.
Okay.
Looks like he's trying to- Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm fighting my way through. Hi. Many of our activities are lab-based, where we are usually using actual tools of the trade. So you go through our lessons, you'll find many that are like that. And I'm guessing, Abigail, you experienced a good number of those last summer in the workshops that you attended, the institutes that you attended.
And I actually also, just to go along with the process standards, I'm putting in the information for the process standards too, if that's helpful to anybody.
It's all very helpful, very impressive.
Can I ask a quick question here, Abigail? Do you allow students to use AI, for example, to do something like they're saying, I really don't understand what I'm reading here. Can I go to AI and I can take it down a reading Lexile level, or do you manage all of that through your hands?
I've done both. If it's younger grades, I do prefer just to manage it, and I would recommend that. But it would depend on the schools and the school policy. My personal philosophy is it's a tool that we should start learning how to use. So I think teaching students how to use it to help them, I don't think is a bad thing. But again, I would refer the AI policies across the nation are across the board, where some schools are like all AI, some schools are no AI, and I would recommend everybody to refer to their school's policies. Awesome. So that is everything I had planned. I hope that this was helpful to you guys. And if anybody has any questions, or if they need to reach out with any questions, please feel free to email me at adutcher@sf.edu.
So I will have this posted, the recording posted up on the Create website. It takes me about, maybe a week to get this up there, and then I will send out an email to everybody. Oh, looks like Jason has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a general question. We were talking about literacy from the standpoint of language, but is there levels of like math literacy? Because obviously as we're introducing students to, concepts in STEM, making sure that if we need to sort of quote unquote dumb them down so that they can grasp the concept and then build up their math literacy, how do you approach that?
That's a good question. I've got a feeling. So the resources I shared are actually, as far as reading and writing, are very big federal initiatives right now. There's rumors that the science of math are going to be developing soon. What I would recommend is, I feel like the math process standards have a lot of thinking involved in it, but I would also look at your standards. Like, I know I'm in Indiana, our standards have like number sense. They're like kind of broken down that way. I would maybe look at some of those buckets. I think it's like number sense, measurement and data, and just trying to build some of those into it. But I've got a feeling that they're going to be coming out with very similar things in the next year for math.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much. And there's great resources in the chat. Anyone who's watching this will be able to access that too, right, Gabby?
I don't think they get the chat. No, they don't get the chat, but the energy lessons are available on the Create website under what is it? Under educator resources, you can find the materials. So, and with that, we are at time. So I thank you all for today. And thank you, Abigail. And we look forward to seeing